Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to another video. I've finally got a modern Porsche on my channel, which I'm super excited about, albeit their very latest electric Taycan. Before we start the video, I want to say two big thanks. First, thanks goes to my good friend Tom for throwing me the keys to this amazing car. The second big thanks goes to BOTB, the Dream Car Competition Company, who are actually sponsoring this video. BOTB actually give away two cars every single week now, a midweek car and one on Sunday, as they've always traditionally done. They're actually giving away a Taycan Turbo at the moment, so the model up from this, worth £116,000. Tickets for that cost £5.55. But if you're not after an electric car and you fancy a traditional Porsche, when I say traditional, I mean a combustion engine Porsche, they actually have another 20 odd Porsches to choose from, so you don't necessarily have to go for a Taycan. Tickets for other cars start from just 85 pence. You have to be 17 years and over to enter the competition, and you could be in with a chance of winning £20,000 worth of cash in the boot. I normally say that will help towards your fuel bills, but in this case, well, it will help towards your electricity bills. So please head over to BOTB using the link below or my pinned comment and enter yourself into the competition and see which car you can win, and hopefully that car might have a boot full of cash. Porsche released the Taycan about a year ago, and at time of launch there was two models available, the Turbo and the Turbo S. A controversial name for a car that doesn't have a turbo, but we're not going to talk about that any further. At the beginning of this year, they then released the entry model 4S, which Tom's got here. Tom calls it the peasant's Taycan, but the retail price on this particular car as a base car is still £83,000, and in fact Tom managed to throw 25 grand's worth of options on this car, so it's well over £100,000. Now the options don't surprise me, because Porsche have always had a habit of basically charging you for everything. You've probably got to pay for things like the steering wheel and floor mats, and in fact it probably doesn't even come with doors for 83 grand. So whenever you're budgeting yourself for any Porsche, whether it is a base spec Boxster or even the Turbo S version of this, always budget yourself for some options, because there will be things that you want with this car. But don't turn away now that I've mentioned this is the base spec Taycan, because it still has 430 horsepower. Except this one's got more, because Tom has optioned the Performance Plus battery option. That's about £5,000, and that adds about 50 horsepower. So we're talking 470 horsepower on a base spec car, which is just madness. Electric cars really are moving on the straight line performance game. Talking of straight line performance, because this has got the Performance Plus battery package, when you engage launch control, you actually get 570 horsepower. So we'll be testing that out a bit later. I've got my race box with me, so we can do a few runs. In fact, we can do as many as we want till it goes flat, because it's an electric car. Okay, you join me about an hour later. You might notice that the car is absolutely drenched, and that's because we're in Yorkshire and it just keeps raining every 10 minutes. So I'm going to crack on, and I'm not going to clean that car, so some people can comment below and say, oh my God, the car's so dirty, why didn't you clean it beforehand? Let's talk about design language. Why do EVs tend to look so strange? I just don't get it. Up until very recently, with cars like the e-tron and obviously this, EV cars have just always looked really odd and not what you want an EV car to look like, in my opinion. You just want it to look like a normal combustion engine car with maybe a couple of telltale signs. I think Porsche have even gone the other direction. They've actually made this look better than pretty much anything else in their current lineup. I absolutely love it. If we rewind a couple of years to the beginning of 2018, I was actually out in Finland and I spotted a couple of prototype Porsche Mission E's, as they were called back then. The Mission E was the prototype to this, the Taycan. And it actually hasn't changed much in that time. It really hasn't. The wheels, where you can actually get the Mission E alloys, which Tom hasn't gone for, and the reasoning behind that is because this doesn't have the optional carbon ceramic brakes, because yet again they are horrendously expensive, and therefore having this wheel design kind of covers the brakes up a bit, because they do look quite small behind these massive 21-inch also optional wheels. which were also another £3,000. But sorry, am I still talking about Porsches and options? But anyway, I get carried away. A bit like the R8, which is actually just behind the camera there, it puts off a really positive vibe, and a lot of people that see it for the first time, including me, are really quite blown away by it, and it's just striking to look at. It really is, and I really applaud Porsche for producing such a beautiful looking car. Again, the headlights, just all of this area, the vents down the side here, which are all to do with airflow and stuff, because it is super slippery, this car. Obviously, without an engine in the front end can be very slim, and the whole car kind of just sets off from there. Talking of those headlight units, they are beautiful, aren't they? Yes, they're another optional extra. I think they're about £2,000. They're the Matrix LED headlamps, but once again, an option that you've probably got to tick when you get this car. Another option that you've got to tick when you get this car, just so you can show your friends, because this is a real party piece and something that does impress everyone, including me, is the, I was going to say fuel filler caps, well, they kind of are fuel filler caps. It's where you plug the car in. So there's one on either side. One is for AC only, and the other one is for AC and DC, or AC-DC, if you say it a bit quicker. Cool thing about these is you walk up to the car, and if you have comfort access, I don't know what Porsche call comfort access, but you know what I mean, keyless access, which this one doesn't have for security reasons, the car will unlock, the door handles will pop out like that, which is gimmicky but also pretty cool. When you walk up to this, you just run your hand under there, and look at that. You can plug it in and charge it up for days, I mean hours. You want to hear what it's like on the road, so we're going to get in it and drive it shortly. Let's close that back up again. Let's jump in the front and have a look at the space of the cabin, and then jump in the back with my driver's seat in the same position, just so you can see how big the cabin is, because it's not massive in there. I would say it's a bit smaller than, say, the Porsche Panamera, and I would class the cabin as, let's say, a BMW 3 Series size. So it's smaller than you would think looking at the size of the car on the outside. First thing you notice when you open the door is actually, well, the doors are quite short and the opening to the door is actually quite small. And it also appears to be shifted quite far forward in relation to the front seats. So the B pillar effectively is quite far forward. So what that means is when you get in and out of the car, especially for someone of my height, 6'4", yes, you remembered, when you get in, you kind of have to step around the door. It's almost a bit like getting in some supercars. You do have to sacrifice it. Tom, the owner of this car, has only had it a couple of weeks, and he said you do get used to it, which I'm sure you do, but it is a little bit tricky. And the problem with it is when I'm filming a piece like this, if I sit back in the seat, you can't see me. Although that's probably a positive for some of you. But plenty of room up here. Beautiful cabin. We'll have a look at that in 2 seconds. Now I'm going to jump from here, this is my driving position, to the back seat to see if we can actually fit 4 fully grown adults in here. So getting out, yeah, it is a little bit tricky. I kind of find myself using my elbow to push myself out of the seat. So it's a little bit of a negative, but it's definitely something that you would work around and probably gets better over time. Back seats. Once again, a very small rear door, like tiny in fact. It's really weird, the proportions of it. The outside shell is actually really big, but the inside door card is really small, and effectively the door card is what the opening of the door is. So it is a very small opening. Think sort of BMW 1 Series in terms of how big that is getting in and out. So difficult for someone of my dimensions. Let's get in here. Now, I can just fit in here leg wise, so I've just got my knees touching the front seat, but remember that's my driving position, that's my comfortable driving position. I could potentially move it forward an inch or so if we had some passengers in the back. My main concern back here is actually headroom. Now I can't put my head back without bashing it on the glass panoramic roof, or the glass screen, or whatever you want to call it, which is also an option. I think to be in the back, you've got to be 6 foot or under to actually physically fit in here properly. The interior of the Taycan is as impressive, if not more so, than the exterior. So it's just beautiful in here, really, really is. I was blown away when I first saw it a couple of days ago and I first sat in it, and I'm still blown away a couple of days later. I just think it is drop dead gorgeous in here. The materials, the fit and finish is lovely. Once again, a lot of this isn't standard, so the wheel's optional. It's got the extended leather package, which I think is about £3,000. It has the optional beautiful sports seats, which again are probably £2 or £3 grand. I'm not sure off the top of my head. So there's lots and lots of options in here, even down to these drink holders, which are very handy. You can put very large drinks in here with no issues. They've got a lovely illuminating ring around them. Here comes the rain again. And that lights up various colours depending on the ambient lighting. Once again, that is an optional extra. But if you do tick all the right boxes, it is lovely in here. I'm not going to go into any detail about the infotainment system. It is all very much touchscreen, very similar to some of the Audi's latest stuff. And as you might know, I'm not the biggest fan of an all touchscreen system. I wish there was some buttons down here. But Porsche have again taken it to another level, even down to things like the vents that are not adjustable at all. You can't turn them on or off. And there's no adjustability in there, except there is. You just need to go into the computer to do it, which I just think is well over the top. But it's a very cool thing to talk about and show your mates when they jump in the car for the first time. I would check out Nick Murray and Doug DeMiro's review of the Taycan, because they go into the detail of the infotainment system far more than I'm going to today, because I've talked enough about this car and the specs and the options it has, etc. I really want to get in it while the rain stops for the next 30 seconds and take it out for a bit of a drive. Like many of you guys and girls, I'm sure, I'm a little bit of a novice when it comes to EVs and kilowatt hour batteries and all these measurements. So I think I understand it enough to try and explain some of it. This Taycan 4S comes standard with a 79 kilowatt hour battery. So think of that number as the size of your traditional fuel tank, because that's what it is. It's the capacity of the battery. If you go for the Performance Plus battery, which this car has, that extends that 79 kilowatt hour to a 93 kilowatt hour. So in other words, it's a bigger range. So that's what that number means and refers to: the capacity of the battery, and therefore the size of your petrol tank, if you like. That gives this 4S a predicted range of about 287 miles. Although owners on the EV Taycan forums and stuff are posting up pictures and talking about ranges of well over 300 miles. Tom's only had this car a couple of weeks, it's done 500 miles, and in that time he's just been showing his friends launch control and stuff and hasn't really gathered a genuine sort of range. He said he's been getting just over 200, but driving it quite erratically like I've been doing today, so forget about that. So let's call it a 300 mile range car. Now Tesla offer the Model S with a long range, I think it's the P100 it's called, and they claim that does closer to 400 miles, I think 370, 380 miles. But real Tesla customers will actually admit that the Model S never gets anywhere near the 370 or 380 claim range, and actually it's more like 320, 330 depending on the weather. All these EVs depend very much on the weather. When it's cold outside, middle of winter, the range is a lot smaller than on a fairly mild day like today. But when it's raining, the range is reduced because you've got your windscreen wipers on, you've got your headlights on, you've got your air conditioning blowing. So there's lots of variables that you wouldn't normally think about in a traditional combustion engine car. The other complicated subject that we need to quickly brush over before we get to the driving dynamics of this car is the charging options available. If you just plug this car in at home, if you've got a garage, you've got a normal plug socket in your garage, and you plug this into your normal main socket, that will charge this at 2.2 kilowatt hours. So in other words, to fully charge this from fully flat, which rarely happens, would take almost 40 hours using a regular plug socket at home. So yeah, not the best. If you get a fast charger installed, which basically feeds out of your main supply before it gets split into your home, so it's right the first bit of where the electricity comes into your house, then you get about 7 kilowatt hours of charge, and that then reduces the charge time of this car from completely flat to completely full in just under 12 hours, which is fantastic, because again, you're probably very rarely going to need to give it complete charge. And when you get in from work or whatever it is, your long day's drive at 9 p.m, if you plug it in by 7:30, 8 a.m, the next morning it's going to be fully charged no matter what. And that's just with a simple fast charger at home. There are no other options really that you can do from your home residence unless you have a 3-phase electricity, which you're probably not going to have, but you might have one of them at work. In terms of charging stations around the country, well, there's quite a few of them now. They're cropping up everywhere. Infrastructure's still not there as far as I'm concerned, but it's obviously getting better and will continue to do so. Most of those are 50 kilowatt hour chargers. Therefore, it would charge this car to full in about an hour and a half's time. But if you wanted to just top it up, you know, have lunch or whatever, you're talking half an hour, 40 minutes, and you're going to get 150 odd miles of range added to the car. So unless you're doing a really extensive journey, that sort of charger will work most of the time. But then saying that, I usually only spend 10 minutes at the service station at the side of the motorway on a long journey, and I certainly wouldn't want to spend too much longer. And that's where this Porsche and Audi's e-tron and a number of other cars really do fall short from the likes of Tesla, who have got the amazing supercharger network scattered all over the country, and charge times are massively reduced. When I referred to the size of the battery as the size of a petrol tank, I will refer to chargers as, let's say, the fuel hose. So a home charger at 2.2 kilowatt hour is a bit like filling your fuel tank up with a straw, whereas a 350 kilowatt hour charger, albeit 9 of them across the whole of the UK, is like filling your traditional fuel tank up with a fire hose, and everything in between that kind of starts to make sense. So yeah, the bigger the number, the faster the charge, or the faster you're going to fill your essential fuel up for your EV car. Right, let's get on with the most important bit of this video, and that's the driving bit. But before we do, let's cut to me a little bit earlier testing out the launch control system in this incredible car and seeing if we can get close to Porsche's claimed 0 to 62 figure. Okay guys, let's attempt launch control in the Taycan 4S. Remember, this has got the Performance Plus battery on it, which gives it roughly 570 horsepower at launch control. So we're in Sport Plus now. Hold it down on the brake. Claimed 0 to 62 figure of 3.8 seconds, but it is absolutely drenched out there. It's not raining at the moment, but the road is just covered in water. So here we go. Launch control ready. 3.84 seconds in these conditions. Let's try again, because you can keep doing it again and again. Launch control ready, here we go. Brace your neck. 3.77, and that time in the green, so dead flat. 0.1% gradient. Race box is telling me that essentially that's completely level. So we've just gone under Porsche's claimed 0 to 62 figure on sopping wet, drenched tarmac. Unbelievable. That is mighty impressive, I'm sure you agree. 3.7, 3.8 seconds to 62 is the same time that an RS6 takes. So the base Taycan, albeit with the Performance Plus battery option, will do the same 0 to 62 time as a current RS6. And this is the slowest Taycan. Can you imagine what a Turbo or Turbo S is? I mean, ludicrous, quite literally ludicrous. Wait, have Tesla copyrighted that name? I don't know, but anyway. Right, we're driving along now in normal, and the first thing to talk about in this car, even though this has the very expensive £4,000 optional 21-inch wheels, is the ride quality. It's unbelievable. It's just magic like, and I know that a lot of journalists have picked up on this and talked about the ride comfort just being amazing, but I can really confirm that it is. It's just so incredible. It just floats over everything. It's so comfortable, and when you're in normal, the suspension does sit up a bit higher and just gives you this beautiful ride. I mean, it's just the driving position is spot on. The ergonomics are just perfect. Look at this. My elbows are resting. I'm holding onto the wheel. I could do some long journeys in this. Well, up to about 300 miles long. And it's just lovely. It's a beautiful place to look over the bonnet. Yeah, with the typical sort of almost 911-esque headlight tunnels, I guess you'd call them. It's just lovely back here. It really is. The light in the cabin, now that it's brightened up a little bit, is just perfect. I'm not sure what this optional glass panel would be like on a really hot summer's day, because I can imagine that the sun would maybe get a little bit annoying. It is obviously very tinted, but when you've got direct sunlight on a very clear summer's day, I don't know how annoying that would be, and there's no blind, nothing that you can pull to close that up. So I do find that a little bit odd, but when you're actually sitting in the driver's seat and looking forward, you don't really notice it. It's when you're sitting in the back, you've got some lovely light and stuff going back there. So it is nice if you're going to have rear seat passengers, a bit like I go on about all the time with panoramic traditional sunroofs. Definitely option them if you've got kids or family if you can, because it just opens the back up, makes the back feel less claustrophobic and bigger back there, even though obviously it's not changing anything to do with the size. It's all sort of a aesthetic or mental feeling that you get back there. Other things to note while we're in normal mode and just cruising along on this lovely road is the lack of tyre noise. We've got massive 305 section rears, 21-inch, 265 section fronts. There's hardly any tyre roar in here, and it's quite a coarse road or tarmac, so it looks like the sort of tarmac that would produce a lot of tyre roar normally. Wind noise, there's absolutely none. Even at 70 miles an hour on the motorway, you really struggle to hear any wind noise, because of course in EVs, the big struggle that they've got, amongst many other things, is the fact that we don't have a combustion engine to drown out the sounds of tyre roar, wind noise, suspension move. There's so many little sounds that you wouldn't normally hear in a traditional car, but in this you would, but there's nothing. And in terms of like cabin squeaks or noises, no, it's beautifully made in here, it really is. You can just hear those stones picking up when I go through the gravel. You probably wouldn't have heard them in, let's say, an M5 competition. But yeah, as a relaxing, nice place to sit, nice place to be, I really can't fault this. I'm not a fan of all the touchscreen stuff. I think that's nonsense in a lot of cars these days, but you can't argue with how good it looks, and in here it's certainly better than some other applications that I've driven. Okay, as we exit this village, I'm now going to turn my drive mode to Sport Plus. Instantly you'll hear, well, a sound that you probably associate electric cars with. It's almost robotic like. I feel the throttle response has become more aggressive, a bit like it is in a normal combustion car. I can feel the ride's a bit stiffer, and in fact the car is now sitting a little bit lower. And this electronic sports sound that they call, you can turn it off, so you don't have to have it on. It's all configurable within Sport Plus, but it's not until you put your foot down the first time and it doesn't matter what car you've driven recently. I drove down here in Audi's R8 rear-wheel drive. That's 540 horsepower, 3.5 seconds to 62, very fast. But even if you were in the right gear and you did that in that beautiful V10 normally aspirated engine, you just would not get anywhere near the response that this thing's got. It's just 30 miles an hour, foot on the floor, and that's 60. I mean, the overtaking king, I guess you could call it. And unlike a Tesla, when you get to about 55, 60 miles an hour, even in the crazy P100D, the performance starts to tail off. And the reason for that is because the Tesla is a single gear. So the electric motor is very responsive down low, but once you get up above 100 miles an hour on private land, which I've done on runways several times with Matt Watson and Rory Reid, even the P100D starts to flatten out above 100 miles an hour. It really does. You can feel the speed slowing, you can watch the numbers slow down. But in this, it just keeps going. And in fact, I was watching a car wow video this morning where Matt Watson pitched a Turbo-esh version, one of these, against a P100D special limited edition thing, and once they got above 100 miles an hour, the Taycan Turbo-S was on a completely different planet. And that's because this has got 2 gears, and you can actually hear it change gear. First, second. Once we get through this next village, there's a great bit of road where we can talk about the driving dynamics of this car. But before we do that, and before we get there, I want to talk about the plus points and the negative points of this particular Taycan. Let's start with the positive points. The drive, the way it drives, the way it accelerates, the performance. It's just all on, I wouldn't say a totally different level to something like an RS6 or an M5 competition, but it really is exceptional, and it's always there when the battery is obviously not flat. It's just always there. The build quality, I mean, you're not going to expect anything but brilliant from Porsche. But this, again, is just on another level, in my opinion. You get in here and everything, aside from this section of the B pillar, is just beautifully made. And yes, this has got the extended leather pack, and it's got this and that, and £25,000 worth of other options. But even the base spec Taycan, the interior, the fit and finish, the plastics that are used are just incredible. The reason this is cheap and fairly nasty feeling is because of the getting in and out issues that I had earlier on, because you're always going to be rubbing, in my case, jeans against there, and if it was leather or even a nicer quality plastic, it would scuff and wear over time. The negatives, well, it has a relatively small boot in the back, and it does have a frunk, but the frunk is really small as well, and I think owners would use the frunk as a place to store their charging cables and that sort of equipment. Ooh, that was close. That was very close. Other negatives are, ironically, the brakes. They're a little bit soggy. The brake feel's just not great, and I don't know if that's because this is an EV, because Porsche traditionally have very good brakes. But as Tom, the owner, pointed out very quickly to me, there is obviously an optional carbon ceramic brake option for this car, which I think is about £6,500, and he didn't go for it because he didn't think it needed them. But I have to say, the brakes, the feel, the initial bite, it just doesn't feel like it's good enough. If you really stamp them on them, like obviously it will slow down, but they just don't feel as impressive as you expect, especially compared to when you're on the loud pedal, which just responds to everything and sends you down the road like you wouldn't believe. The brakes almost feel prehistoric compared to the accelerator. So if you can afford the carbon ceramics, then I probably would, especially on the more powerful Turbo and Turbo S versions. Two things about the rear of the car that aren't that great. It is a little bit cramped back there, but it's not too bad. I wouldn't go for the 3-seat bench option because I can't imagine there's going to be enough seat for 3 people back there, but it's okay. And talking at the back, rear vision, you're looking through a tiny little envelope back there. There's a really small window, and I would say it's got rear vision that's comparable to many supercars out there, and probably worse than the R8 that I drove down here in. It's really tricky to see out there, and yeah, probably not acceptable. There are quite a few blind spots in here. Let's talk about the performance. Let's take this car for a drive. So we're still in Sport Plus. I was going to say I'd go into manual and use the paddles, but there are no paddles and there is no manual option. There is the 2 gears, but the car deals with what gear it thinks it should be in. So let's just push on and see what it feels like. Every time I've done that over the past 2 days, every time I've even touched the throttle, I just can't believe the response. Like, it is just ridiculous. Coming here, it's a lovely little section of road. Remember, we're driving a 2.3 ton 4-seater saloon through here, and it just feels great because all of the weight is low. All the batteries, all the heavy stuff of this car, and there's a lot of weight, is basically on the floor, so you get very little roll and just traction for days. 4-wheel drive, traction for days, massive tyres and all that weight on them as well. So even in damp conditions like this, you just get so much traction. It's crazy. You just got to constantly be keeping an eye on the speed, because it is at 60 miles an hour in literally seconds everywhere, no matter what. It's just amazing. It really, really is. Guys, I think I'm going to end the video there because I've talked for long enough. This is already a very, very long video. I want to massively thank Tom, the owner, for letting me drive his brand new Pride and Joy work car. I'm actually going to get to drive his GT3 997.2 as well, so keep an eye out for that video. I can't wait for that car. Talk about 2 ends of the scale with Porsche. I think, yeah, that's really exciting me. The other people I need to really thank hugely is BOTB. They've really helped me get through this difficult year, and I know you see me in all these amazing cars doing some fairly incredible things this year, but business wise is completely dead, and I've really struggled to sort of get through this year, keep up the motivation to keep shooting YouTube videos for you guys, for my own, you know, personal pleasures. But BOTB have stood by me and supported me the whole time, so please make sure you do check out their link below and see if you can win a car. Remember, tickets only start from 85 pence, but you could win a Taycan Turbo. I can't imagine what that would be like for £5.55. Just needs to be 17 and over. So check out the link below, it's in the pinned comment, and please support those guys because they really have supported me and my channel this year. Thanks for watching, guys. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this, and I will see you at the next video. Cheers. Wildlife love this car. Just to give you an idea of how quiet it is, you can probably hear those ducks even when I pull away. Listen. Yeah, genuinely.